Welcome back, everyone, to the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Damon here with my co-hosts David and Matt this week, going over the division races that are starting to tighten up. We've had some divisions clinched already. We got Canada making a major philosophy change, I guess you want to call it, getting ready before the postseason, which is going to be big for some teams. Some off-season news that usually we get there, but a team has hired a president of baseball operations, and then a couple little injury news and concerns. But before we jump into all of that, how you doing, David?
I'm doing good. I'm tired. Got to play some football today at after work, so we'll see if I can make it through here. But had a good week, and hopefully we're ready for playoff baseball coming up. How you
Yeah.
doing,
So
Matt?
hi. Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Just had a pretty good week, and I watching a lot of sports, watching all the baseball, of course, watching some football as well, and pretty tired, but yeah, things going good. So I'm ready to get into some baseball talk this week. We're just a few weeks left in the season, and it's getting fun. So
Yeah. So before we jump right in, I wanted to address kind of what happened with last week's episode. Somehow in the I guess time between recording and when it processed into I downloaded it, something happened with the audio files between all three of ours, and it got all messed up on the podcast side. I really didn't have a way. I didn't know that until Wednesday. Didn't have a way to really fix it. So I'm sorry if anyone listened to episode 96. It's messed up. I have no way to really fix it. So I will try to be better at looking at that moving forward. But we'll just jump in and hope that this is a lot better of an episode than that was last week because it was all scrambled on our end as well. But let's go ahead and start with Canada. It was announced today that Canada is going to be dropping the vaccine requirements for travelers. Should be beginning on September 30th, which is right before the end of the regular season. And that's going to be big news for some of those teams that have to go to Canada in a potential playoff series if they have some guys who are still on the unvaccinated status.
yeah, I mean, without getting in the political part of it, what this does for baseball. I mean, I think it's great for baseball because I think it's a shame that some players weren't going to be able to play there. I mean, and we weren't going to have a full, ability to see what's going on in an actual play in the playoff series out there if that had been the case. But I know there were a couple of Yankees that were not allowed to play out there, and then I'm sure there's been players from some of the other AL teams. I think the Astros had a couple maybe too. But we don't know who the Blue Jays will match up with, but we'll see what happens. But I'm glad that's not going to be have an impact on the postseason. That's really good news.
David, you got
Yeah, I
anything
think
to add?
it's. Yeah, I was gonna say it's good that it's coming now. Before the playoffs hit, but um, it does put all these teams at a competitive equilibrium where Tampa Bay is going to be traveling to Toronto if the season were to end today. For I'm pretty sure the wild card is 2 games at the other team's home stadium, and then if the third game goes if needed, right? It's
No,
been
I
a
think
minute since
I,
I've checked
I
that
think it's
new
a three
playoff
game.
system too.
yeah,
I think it's a 3 game series at the
Oh, there
better
you go.
record
yeah.
team's
Right, and
stadium.
Toronto's got that right now. They're the best wild card team in the AL, so Canada would be hosting a playoff game or a playoff series, and that may put another team at a disadvantage. So, that's good for everyone else. Maybe bad for the Blue Jays. Kind of gives up a little bit of a competitive advantage for them, but it's going to be important to determine who's the best team. I mean, the Blue Jays aren't even out of the AL East yet, so they could be hosting multiple series deep into the playoffs. That's, I think, a team that I would have predicted early in this, like before the season this year, to be a World Series contender, and I think they can still get there with that potent offense.
Well, you will learn our preseason predictions do not go well on the show. We'll hit on that later on, but moving over to the American League Central, there the Detroit Tigers finalized their hire of Giants general manager Scott Harris as their player or president of baseball operations this week.
Yeah, I know that he's been. I've read and heard that he's supposed to be a rising star in the profession, and that a lot of people are, really like him. Obviously, the Giants, have done a really good job the last couple years of, in free agency of identifying players that they can go out and get. without having to give up a ton for them. Stuff like, some of the pitchers they've been able to go out and get. They've done a really good job identifying which ones are going to perform well. They bring in a guy like Carlos Rodon, bringing in Kevin Gossman a couple of years ago. They've done a really solid job. Obviously, he wasn't running the show there, but at the same time, he was, he was a big part of helping out and being a big part of that front office. And I think Detroit really needs somebody who's a little bit more analytically minded. They've gone out the last couple of years. They've gotten a lot of players who are more, kind of your traditional type guys, and it hasn't worked. So they really need somebody like a Scott Harris to come in and hopefully do a good job there. That is a really tough situation because I think that the Tigers have a couple of really bad contracts that are new, and a lot of their prospects that just came up are really struggling. So hopefully, hopefully they're able to have some of those prospects really turn into something. But right now, that's a tough job. But we'll see what the guy can do. Let's hopefully he gets a really good shot there and does a good job for them.
Yeah, Scott Harris was in the Cubs front office from 2012 to 2019, and that's when the Cubs went on their run of winning the World Series, and he came along with Theo Epstein there in 2012, and he got poached by Farhan in 2019 by the Giants, and I think that's an indication that Scott Harris is a really good baseball mind, and Theo Epstein's had absolutely nothing but massive praise for Scott Harris. I pulled an article from 2019 that said, we loved working with him, and he was a huge part of our culture, and that this guy did a whole lot of like responsibilities as the Cubs. I think he was like their director of scouting operations or something to that effect, where he was going out and finding talent, and he's really one of those guys that's going to be, I think, a GM or a president of baseball operations to lead a team into a competitive window that we're kind of seeing with since Billy Beane and Moneyball. We've really seen the rise of these kind of analytical Harvard style minds, and Scott Harris is just the latest of that group. He was good in the Cubs, he was good in the Giants. I see no reason that he won't be able to turn around Detroit. And I think it's pretty clear from those old comments by Theo Epstein when he left the Cubs that this is a guy who can build a culture. And the Tigers need a massive culture shift, because I don't think their problem this year was so much a matter of players like Riley Green, Spencer Torkelson. It wasn't a matter of talent. It wasn't a matter of contracts, right? Because Javi Baez is still a good baseball player. Eduardo Rodriguez is still a good pitcher. It was a matter of they did not make any sort of adjustments, and their players seemed to all get worse once they hit the major leagues. And I think you got to have a top-down approach that is, creating that culture that's going to win you baseball games, where it seems like in Detroit, the pressure got put on all their players to succeed after their big offseason, and it really just tumbled them down the order and created maybe a big question mark and got a lot of people fired. So you got to see if this guy can lead you, and I think that Scott Harris is the perfect guy for that, because Detroit has a whole lot of talented players, but he's going to have to rebuild the coaching staff. He's going to have to rebuild the front office. He's got to hire a GM, I think, still. So I'd look out for that, especially before free agency, because Detroit always tends to spend a lot of money. And this free agent class is pretty stacked, and they do have some really good young players, so they could be involved in the trade market as well. So I imagine Scott Harris is going to be dangerous for the rest of this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I mean, I think what it allows is you're going to see them take the more analytical approach. Detroit has always been one of the people or one of the teams that has always been more stubborn with the old school of baseball and then their history and stuff. So to get a guy in there who you've seen what the Giants have done, they match up better than anybody. They platoon a lot more. They don't push a guy past his limit and on the pitching staff. I think you're going to see that a lot with Detroit moving forward. Especially with those young guys, maybe it's, hey, we're not going to develop you as 7-8 inning guys or 6 inning guys. Even it's like maybe you're just going to be a 5 and dive guy. We've seen the Giants have success with a guy like Alex Wood, Anthony DeSclafani, and at times before Kevin Gossman really broke out last year, he was kind of that same guy for them. So I wonder what that approach is going to be like with the young guys moving forward on the pitching staff side. And then they just need to develop those young star hitters that they have, because they have a wealth of talent there in the minor leagues. That once those guys all start playing, like we've seen the past month and a half, Riley Green has been one of the best hitters in baseball. Um, Overall, his approach has been a lot better. He's been hitting the ball over the place. And you need to see that adjustment from Spencer Torkelson as well. But I was really high on the Tigers coming into the year, and I still think that approach is there. And I think the Scott Harris hire is just even more fantastic for that team in the next 3 to 4 years to be really successful. But let's go ahead and jump over to sort of the injury front per se, and we'll start with the New York Yankees, where they had their big deadline acquisition of Frankie Montas, ended up going on the IL. Shows like the MRI didn't show any structural damage. Should be shut down for about 10 days, and then they'll pick it back up from there. But they are getting their other big name deadline acquisition back. Actually, just activated today with Harrison Bader.
Yeah, so starting with Frankie Montas, this was a concern for the trade. Back when he was with Oakland, remember a couple weeks before he had to get pulled from a start early because of shoulder discomfort, and then he ended up, avoiding the IL and stuff. Then missed one start, came back, looked fine, and the trade went through as was planned. But ever since he's been in New York, something's been off with him. I mean, he's got a 6.35 ERA and 39 and 2/3 innings as a Yankee. His strikeouts are way down. His walks are way up. He's given tons of home runs. His fastball velocity is down a half a point on average. It's been really rough for him since he got to New York, and there could be a lot of explanations for that, but one of them could be injury, and he might have been pitching through a shoulder problem, which typically never works out very well. And of course, now he's going on the IL with shoulder discomfort. The good news, like you said, is that it sounds like he is going to be okay. He doesn't. There's no like major structural damage that's going to keep him out for months and months. We'll see. We've only got 2 weeks left in the season, so we'll see if he's able to make it back in time for the end of the regular season. I guess that would be more than, so that's maybe make one more regular season start or make a postseason start. But definitely a problem for the Yankees. They gave up a lot of talent to get him too, and it's kind of a bummer for them if he doesn't do well and isn't able to pitch much in the postseason this year, and then only get him really as a 1 year rental for the price they gave up. That would be pretty rough for him. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully he gets better and soon.
First thing is that you guys keep calling Bader and Montas the only additions for the Yankees, but they added Scott Efros also, who is also injured. So, the Yankees did not seem to do all that well when on the injury front at the deadline. But um, I went and checked Ken Waldachuk's stats because he just debuted with Oakland a few weeks ago. He's got a 7.35 ERA. So, don't know that the Yankees are really kicking themselves just yet, but Montas is definitely a problem, and I wonder who's going to make those playoff starts for the Yankees going forward. I mean, the whole point of adding him was that they had these big gaps in their rotation with Severino going down again, and I mean, you've got Garrett Cole, Nestor Cortez, and Jamison Talon, and they look really strong as a 1, 2, 3 in the playoff rotation. But I mean, are they going to go bullpen game for that fourth game? I just don't know. And Montas was supposed to solve that, and he kind of hasn't. So um, I don't think you can even rely on him in the playoffs if he does come back. It just wouldn't be smart. I don't think it'd be kind of guaranteeing yourself a loss in that fourth game.
Yeah, I mean, you might see Domingo Herman. I mean, he's been pretty solid for them, as a 4 or 5 inning guy. I could see them starting with Herman and then going to the bullpen early. Is
Yeah.
let him go one time through the order, maybe part of a second time, and then get him out and go to a kind of a de facto bullpen game in that way, where you're kind of using a long man, as what a lot of teams used to say.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
think.
tough for. I was going to say that's tough for the Yankees too, because I mean I know they added A Frost and he's injured, right? And then
Mhm.
like Michael King's injured, Clay Holmes I think is back, but he hadn't really been all that reliable at times down the stretch. I mean they have a lot of, their bullpen's not near as deep as it was early in the season, so that's kind of a
Yeah,
big deal for that type of game too.
my idea for the Yankees in that fourth game is probably you throw Herman one time through the order, and then you go to Clark Schmidt for the second time through the order. You go righty lefty. You change the look. That's probably what they're going to have to do. Each of them throws 3 innings, and then you turn to the back end of your bullpen. Hopefully, you have Efros back. You have Clay Holmes, Lucas Luch, Wandy Peralta has been okay. And, I think they can make it work. The Yankees are still a formidable team. Don't count them out by any means, but there's definitely been a clear reason why that lead in the division has slipped to, I think it's now 5 games over the Blue Jays, to where the Yankees look vulnerable. And they didn't look vulnerable earlier in the year. They looked like they were going to pull a Dodgers and win 110 games. So the injuries biting them, and they're going to be one of the big stories entering the playoffs with such a potent offense, and then this kind of question mark in the rotation and in the bullpen with these injuries. The Yankees may be one of the more fascinating teams because the Yankee fans, the Yankee players, they expect a World Series. It's been a while since 2009 since the Yankees have won a World Series. This feels like their year with a guy going for maybe the best offensive season we've ever seen, and they'd hate to waste it.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when that guy's probably not going to be on the Yankees anymore. So
Yeah.
possibly, I won't say probably. I'll say
Ooh,
possibly.
hot
We'll,
takes.
yeah, for the off season, we'll have a predictions episode on that one. But let's stay on the injury front there, and we'll jump over to the National League side now. And it's with your Atlanta Braves, Matt, where Ozzy Albies, who had just came back off of a broken foot, I believe, just a couple games in, and then ends up fracturing I believe it's his right pinky, and is going to be out for the rest of the regular season. There is a possibility that could come back sometime in the playoffs, although I don't think there's a clear timetable on when they're looking for that yet.
Yeah, so you kind of hit it right there. I mean, I would go on about how what missing Ozzy Albies will do to the Braves, but we've been seeing it for 3 months already. But I mean, I hate it for him because he worked really hard to get back from a broken foot, and then it's like literally 2 games later he's already injured again. It really stinks for him. And I love Ozzy Albies. I think he's a great personality. He means a lot more to the Braves than just the fact that he's a really good player too. Which I guess part of that could be, he can still be a part of the clubhouse and stuff. But I hate to see him break his finger. The good news is that, like you said, it's not some kind of like extremely severe injury where he's going to miss like it might rule him out part of next year or something. And there's a slight chance that he could come back. In the playoffs, if it's maybe if the Braves make it to the NLCS or something, he could potentially maybe come back. But at this point, like you've been riding with Vaughn Grissom at second. He's done really well there. So I don't know if it would even be worth it to rush Ozzy back, even if he could maybe play at some point in the playoffs, just because Vaughn Grissom's been playing really well, and it would take Ozzy a couple weeks to get his timing back down again, anyways. So I think it's definitely something where, it probably does take him out for the year, but, I hate it for him. It's just, he's had a lot of freak injuries in his career. And when he's in the minor leagues, he had a broken elbow on a really weird, like, he swung the bat and it just broke his elbow really weird. And he dealt with that broken foot was also on a swing, which was extremely weird. And now a broken pinky from diving into third base or second base. I think it actually got stepped on. I think he dove in and then it got stepped on. So, it's a shame, but I mean, hopefully he, hopefully he, recovers, and you never know. Maybe we do see him again in the playoffs.
I will say that this may actually be advantageous for the Braves, where you're not playing what is currently about a 30% worse hitter than Vaughn Grissom has been. Vaughn Grissom's got a 128 WRC plus. Ozzy Albies has 92 this season, and that's not Ozzy Albies' true potential. He's usually about a 105 to 110 WRC plus guy, but I mean, the way he's hit this year and the way he's played this year. Last year he stole 20 bases. This year he's got three in three almost 300 plate appearances. So, uh, it's been a less explosive season from Ozzy Albies, and Vaughn Grissom's definitely come in and been that kind of explosive talent for the Braves. He's already stolen 5 bases. He's slugging. He's doing everything well. He's not playing as good defense at second base as Ozzy Albies, but just I think if it was down, trying to make a choice between two guys, I think I'd probably choose Von Grissom right now, run the hot hand, and I think this is going to work out well for the Braves. They're fighting for the division. They're fighting for this playoff spot. They've got a lot of other roles already locked up. Don't take away the guy who's performing really well right now for this guy who's been performing worse, even though he is an incumbent. So it works out for him, I think, and I think the Braves are going to be better for this. We'll see. Von Grissom may have something different, a different feeling when he gets into the playoffs, when those games really start to ramp up in intensity.
Yeah, and that's always been something that Ozzy has always throve in is in the postseason. He in the clutch moment, he's always a guy that you want up. His heartbeat is never speeds up. He can take the professional at bat and in the postseason, can deliver those big hits and big RBIs when you need it. But like Matt mentioned, the good thing about the it's not an injury that's going to take him away from the team. He can still be there as a clubhouse guy, which is something that is probably more valuable than Ozzy on the field. Is just the type of teammate he is, the clubhouse presence, the energy that he brings. He can still bring that from the dugout. I mean, sure, it won't be on the field there, but you have guys like Ronald Acuna still out there. Like, he'll bring the energy on the field just fine. Ozzy can still keep that dugout into it. He can bring the energy from there, and I don't think they'll miss that part of it because he'll be with them every step of the way. You'll just miss maybe the clutch at bat here and then in the postseason, but you can still have. I mean, that lineup is going to be just as stacked too. Dansby's been playing out of his mind. Austin Riley's been just as good of a season as he had last year, and then they got Matt Olson. So yeah, I think they'll be just fine on field wise. It'll just be the clubhouse presence, which you'll still have with Ozzy for sure. But staying in that division, the team that the Atlanta Braves are chasing and battling with for this division with the New York Mets, they got one of their big starters back last night, Max Scherzer. He looked really good, and actually within that start was able to reach the 200 career win milestone.
Yeah, congrats to Max Scherzer on his 200th win. That's really impressive. Obviously, wins aren't really that big of a that big of a statistic in my mind, but still, someone did point out the other day that, when you accumulate career wins, it means a few things. And one of them, it means you can't fake your way into having a lot of wins, over a long period of time. You can for a couple of years. It's more often though that a lot of pitchers who are really, really, really good don't have a lot of wins than it is that a lot of pitchers who are really, really bad do have a lot of wins over a long period of time. And then it's a career longevity thing too. And that's one thing to point out with Max Scherzer is that he's been around and relatively healthy for 15 years now, it feels like. So, that's a great accomplishment for him. I mean, you got so many big leaguers that would love to make 200 starts in their career and much less win 200 games. So congrats to him. And then from a baseball standpoint, I know Scherzer came back. He looked really good. He was on a pitch count. I think he actually might have had a no hitter going when they took him out, but he was at 67 pitches and he had a hard 70 pitch count. So they weren't going to stress it with it coming back from injury. But yeah, I mean, they had a great he's a great pitcher, and if he's healthy, then that's a big help for the Mets for him coming back.
Matt, he had a perfect game going.
Yeah, I thought it was either a no hitter or a perfect game or something. Yeah.
I mean, I would say this is a turning point for the Mets. An older Mets would have pushed Max Scherzer to complete the perfect game or give it up, right? You're seeing a Mets team that is solely focused on winning the World Series this season, and that's dangerous because it's been a long time. The Mets have been kind of the laughing stock of the league for as long as I can remember, at least since like 2015 when they lost the World Series. I mean, it's been a struggle for them, and we've seen Jacob deGrom. You talk about wins. I mean, deGrom won the Cy Young despite winning like 10 games because the Mets could never get him a win when he was sitting there throwing lights out baseball. Max Scherzer hasn't had that problem this season with the Mets. He's won, I think, 10 games this season. And, the win as a pitcher stat, it's fine if you don't allow it to, sway your belief of what that player is worth. Right? If you can't sit here and say, well, Max Scherzer has a lot of wins, therefore he's a good pitcher. It's Max Scherzer is a good pitcher, and look at the wins he's racked up. It's a you got to divide that in your mind, and it's, I think for the longest time we used wins and win loss record, pitcher record to determine the worth of pitchers. But Max Scherzer's been a really good pitcher for a really long time on every metric, including the win metric. So that guy's a bulldog. He gets out there and wins games. You know, he hated coming out of that game with a perfect game going. He probably could have thrown 130 pitches, but the Mets made a smart decision. They're focused on the World Series. Max Scherzer, Jacob deGrom's going to be absolutely filthy in the playoffs, and I'm really nervous as to whoever's going to have to face them, because I don't know how you're going to score any runs. Those guys look awesome right now.
Yeah, and the only thing is they might have pushed him if he wasn't just coming off the injury and already had been battling injuries this year. I mean, you could have seen that, but like you said, DeGrom and Scherzer have looked locked in when they've been on the mound this year. But it's just the matter of when they have been on the mound this year. Are they going to stay healthy into the postseason? In the postseason, are they going to stay healthy? I mean, we saw Max Scherzer last year look really good in the NLDS, and then couldn't even really pitch in the championship series due to the dead arm. Like the arm just gave
Mm-hmm.
out then. So you just never know. It's just one little thing can bite a dead arm, which Scherzer's had before, a back, which Scherzer's dealt with. DeGrom's dealt with his shoulder and back the past year. If they can keep those guys healthy, they will be dangerous. But it's just right now they've battled it so far. They haven't shown the ability this season to have sustained health. Um, so far. But I wish they do, because those postseason games and those series against the Mets will be a lot of fun if you got two guys like that on the mound with the intensity that they bring every day. But we'll stay with the Mets a little bit here, and that just allows us to kind of look at the division that they are in with the Braves right now, battling so close there, and then just the whole broad landscape of kind of the close matchups that we're looking at right now. I know we have the wild card spots. We're battling there, and I believe it's the American League Central's probably kind of opened itself back up, but we have had two divisions clinched so far.
Yeah, I guess we'll start with the East since we were just talking about it. And I mean the East's close. I mean the Braves, they're up by a run right now tonight in the seventh inning. The Mets are down by a run in the like the sixth inning maybe. And tonight's game, if the scores hold, which they very well might, and they might not, they're both one-run games. But if the scores hold, then they will be tied in the division. Right now, the Mets have a one-game lead, and they have the schedules. I think the Mets' schedule is just a little bit easier. The Braves have the Phillies this weekend, who they actually just swept this past weekend, and the Mets have, I forgot who the Mets even have, but it wasn't somebody very good this weekend. It might be the Marlins or somebody. Um, they have I'll look real quick. They have the A's this weekend. So definitely, the Mets have a little bit of a schedule advantage there. But the Braves and the Mets play each other next weekend in Atlanta, which very well could be the decisive three games of this division, which the Mets led for so long. But and for that matter, the Mets haven't collapsed in this division either. People are going to talk about they blew a 10-game lead in the division, but I mean, the Mets have won a ton of games and they haven't faded. The Braves have been on like a historically good tear, and honestly, are really, I think they might be like one game behind the Dodgers or one game ahead of the Dodgers even since the start of June, in record wise. So, which just have been insane because the Dodgers have been insane. So, it'll be very interesting to see what ends up happening. With the schedules the way they line up, I still probably would favor the Mets a little bit to win it, but it's going to be very close. And it'll be a really entertaining last couple weeks for this division, and it's very important because as we talked about the Mets with that 1-2 punch, they're at a big disadvantage if those two guys have to throw in the wild card series and then are not able to start the first couple games of a potential division series, and also the fact that whoever is the loser of this division, if they win the wild card series, they have to play the Dodgers in the division series. So, which is going to be a tough task. So we'll see what happens. I think it's going to be a really entertaining race here down the stretch in the NL East.
Yeah, and I'll quickly note that the other real race kind of comes in the NL wild card, where you have the Brewers 2.5 games behind the Phillies. the Brewers have since fallen on really hard times of late after that trade deadline, currently projected to continue to fall and not make the playoffs. And I think that's probably what's going to happen. But the Phillies are very vulnerable. And I envision that it'll be one of those two in that final wild card spot. I think the Padres are talented enough to get there, but their woes have been well documented. That team has just not meshed after the trade deadline. So we'll see. But the way things look right now is that that wild card, while it's nearly as close as the NL East, it's really not going to matter all that much, I think, in the grand scheme of things, because I don't think either the Phillies or the Brewers are a team that you could really plug into a World Series contender. But weirder things have happened. In baseball, it really is. You just have to get into the postseason, and you have a chance to go all the way. So, um, I nobody's going to be taking that lightly. But I don't think either of those teams are particularly strong enough to get there. But it is a 2.5 game lead, so we'll see if the Phillies can hold them off. That offense is absolutely potent. Aaron Nola's having an incredible year. It'll be a tall task, I think, for them to win games in the postseason. But I think the Phillies do have a leg up on getting there over that kind of hapless Brewers right now.
Yeah, the one thing about the Phillies and the Brewers is that the Brewers have a much easier schedule remaining than the Phillies. So, in fact, the Brewers' remaining strength of schedule is a 479 winning percentage, and the Phillies is a 517 winning percentage remaining. So, the Phillies are going to have to play some good teams here in the last couple weeks, and the Brewers' schedule is a lot more favorable. So, obviously, that might not matter. The Phillies have the leg up right now, but we'll see what happens there. But I definitely don't think it's completely over. And for that matter, the Padres have a pretty tough schedule remaining as well. So I don't know if they'll end up, I don't know if they'll end up winning. I think they'll probably be fine. Some of their pitchers are starting to get going a little bit again. And honestly, I was looking at their statistics, and they have some guys who have been pretty unlucky lately, including, Juan Soto's been really unlucky lately on balls in play. So I think they'll be fine. Definitely going to be an interesting close to that wild card race, but I think you probably end up seeing the Phillies and the Padres. But I would not completely count out the Brewers just because that pitching staff is good, and you never know what might happen with the Phillies. They haven't been there in a long time, and they're feeling the pressure right now. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then
and
just
go ahead, Damien.
no, go ahead. You finish up because mine was jumping over to something else.
Okay, yeah. The last division it's a 4 game stretch, so I would say anything 5 games are up with only 14, 15 to play is probably over. But the White Sox are 4 games behind the Guardians, and um, I would say they're right on the cusp, but they have gone on a bit of a run since Tony La Russa stepped away. I don't think that's a coincidence in the slightest. I think the White Sox were one of my favorite teams coming into this year, and it has not meshed at all. They have been really not good. They didn't add at the deadline because their farm system is quite frankly terrible, but they're going to give it their all here the rest of the way. And 4 games out, that's one 4 game set against the Guardians. I don't know if they have one left, but
They just start a 3 game series today.
yeah, so they're playing the Guardians right now. So, after these 3 games, I think we'll have a much better understanding of whether this division is going to, get closer or further apart. But the Guardians put the Twins away last weekend, pretty much sent them down to, I think, 7 or 8 games behind. So now, the Guardians have the opportunity to put away the White Sox, and the White Sox have been as good as they've been all season. They've actually won some games, gotten above 500 for the first time all year in the last couple of weeks. So this race could come down and get a lot more interesting if these 3 games go the way of the White Sox. If the Guardians win the series, I think this division might be over.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't disagree with you. But you never know. I mean, I think the White Sox talent level's a lot more than the Guardians, and 4 games in 2 weeks is tough. But you never know when a team might just go on a cold stretch too. So
yeah, and then just it's a very outside chance, but just looking at the American League wild card, the Toronto Blue Jays and the Tampa Bay Rays, who are the top two wild card teams, they start a 4 game series this weekend. starting on Thursday against each other. So it'll be really interesting to see the way if anyone beats up on each other there. And then I believe it's the Blue Jays they're playing Houston now. They have the 4-game set with Toronto. They have to play Cleveland, and then they have to play Houston again before finishing the season with the Red Sox. So it's a really tough stretch there. If they, tend to struggle any bit right there, like I said, it's an outside chance, but you might be able to see a team like Baltimore, if they can get a little bit of a run, jump into it. Because Toronto and Tampa Bay have to face some tough competition to end the season out. But let's go ahead and jump over to our players of the week and go ahead and wrap this show up. So we'll start with our hitters this week, and then we'll go ahead and start with Matt, because I know your hitter this week is doing something that we should probably talk about in general.
Yeah. So my hitter this week is Aaron Judge, which you could have named him a lot of times this year, but this week he's been especially on a tear again. He's only played 5 games, but he's hit 4 home runs in those 5 games. He's up to 59 on the season, which we'll talk about in a minute. But he's got a 550 average with a 640 on base and a 1.250 slugging percentage. That is a 416 WRC plus this week. He's been worth a full win above replacement. And just talking about what's that done for his season numbers. He's now up to a 209 WRC plus on the season. He's up over 10 WAR on the season now, which I believe he's the third player active in the big leagues to have put up a 10-win season now. With him, Trout, and Mookie Betts, I think are the 3 that have ever done that. I do not believe Albert Pujols has ever done that, which is pretty surprising that he didn't do it at some point when he was with the Cardinals the first time. But the big story is that he's up to 59 home runs with, I believe we got 2 weeks left. So Roger Maris's record is very much in jeopardy, the Yankee record, and you know, uh, and that would be a huge accomplishment for Aaron Judge to get to that record. I think he probably does it. He's got a couple weeks left. I believe he's got 15 games left. So 14 games left after tonight, which he's actually hadn't done much tonight. So he definitely has a chance to hit 5 home runs in 15 games. So we'll see if he's able to do it. But if he gets to 63, 64 home runs, that'd just be an incredible. It's already an incredible season. What an incredible feat that'll be, especially in a year where home runs seem to be back down just a little bit too.
Yeah, and the one of the biggest things too is that he's only a couple batting points away from leading the Triple Crown categories right now. I believe the American League batting average is 319. I want to say, I could be wrong, but he's at 316 now. So he's very very close, within a couple of hits of being the leader for the Triple Crown, which was Miguel Cabrera the last one that did it in the American League.
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
I think he's the last one that did it in general.
So
Yep.
yeah, and then on that home run record, it wouldn't just be a Yankees record; it'd be an American League record, because the American League one is 61 as well. So it'd be a historic all around. And some people might say it's the all time home run record, but Barry Bonds technically still has that one.
Nah. I will say that for what Aaron Judge is doing, right? One of my favorite stats, WRC plus, tells you what percentage the player is better than the league around them. Aaron Judge is at 210 WRC plus, 210. He's 110% better than the league around him this season as an offensive player. The last player to do that in a full season was a guy by the name of Barry Bonds. So you have never seen a season that's this much better than the season. You have never seen a season this much better than the league around it, unless you watched Barry Bonds play baseball from 2001 to 2004. This is a incredible feat that Judge is pulling off because the home run is down. The league-wide offensive categories are all down, average, on-base, slugging. Every bit of offensive value is lower, and Aaron Judge has stepped in, and he's about to break a home run record that stood for 60-something years in the AL. So this is an unprecedented stretch, I think, from Aaron Judge, and it's a really special season. I'll transition to my player of the week as we're here, though, and it's a little less about the skill and the talent and more about what he's been doing off the field as well. And we talked about the Tigers earlier, but Javi Baez has finally put together one of those patented Javi Baez stretches where he just hits 500 for a couple of weeks. He does that a couple times a year. Usually, it seems like this year he hasn't done that yet, but he finally got a hold of one. He's hit 500 in the last week, 2 home runs. But the big thing that he did this week that made me want to pick him as my player of the week was Hurricane Fiona just hit Puerto Rico and dropped a ton of like 25 inches of rain on the country of Puerto Rico. And Javi Baez is from there, so he is already sending money and supplies down, courtesy of that big contract from the Tigers to help the people of Puerto Rico. And I think that's just he doesn't have to do that, right? Like Puerto Rico is kind of under control of the U.S. and the government should really be helping them. And Javi Baez has stepped out and said, "I'm helping them." We got to help Puerto Rico, and that's the kind of thing, the kind of leadership that I would want to see from my favorite players. So, Javi Baez is exciting on the baseball field, but he's a really good guy off the field. And I've haven't watched him and supported him for a long time. I love Javi Baez, and that's the kind of thing I want to see my athletes doing.
Yeah, and I think there might have been another player that was doing that too, and I'm
It's
not
probably
100%.
Jose Barrios, if I know anything. He's
It might
Javi's
have been.
brother-in-law.
Or
It
Kike. I
could
know
be.
Kike's done a lot too.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Kike
I'm
too.
sure a lot of. I'm sure a lot of these Puerto Rican players are going to do that. I'm sure Yadier Molina will probably help out as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it might have been Eddie Rosario. Might have been the one, and it might have just been talking about him being from there and his. I was watching the Braves game yesterday. They were talking about it, but yeah, I mean that's unfortunate, and hopefully, hopefully everyone there is safe. I know I have some extended family that or I have a cousin by marriage that family lives down there, so hope everyone in Puerto Rico is safe. And there's more trouble with hurricanes upcoming. Hopefully not, but it looks like there's a possibility of more trouble. So that could affect the U.S. So hope everyone out there stays safe. But that's definitely a good gesture from Javi Baez to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really fun to see when professional athletes get involved and do these things that they don't necessarily have to do. But for my hitter this week, we're jumping back to what they've done on the field wise. It's Yordan Alvarez. The week Aaron Judge had batting 550 with a 416 WRC plus. Yordan Alvarez wasn't far behind, a 480 average, 500 on base, a 393 WRC plus. Tied Aaron Judge for WAR this week with one. Hit one more homer, although he played one more game, but he had 11 RBIs and 10 runs this week. Just absurd numbers from Yordan Alvarez. I mean, I know we've talked about how good of a hitter he is and what he does for that lineup, but man, when you have a week where he gets 5 homers, 10 runs, 11 RBIs, and helps carry that offense, it's really fun to watch a guy like that play.
Yeah, and we didn't really even mention that the Astros clinched their division, but
Yeah.
the big reason of that is Yordan Alvarez. I mean, he has been special this year. He's special pretty much every year that he's able to stay on the field, but being able to walk like he's walking and provide that kind of power. He's also he's at 37 home runs, which I think goes back to Judge a little bit and says Judge is over 20 homers ahead of Yordan on the season. Which is absolutely wild. But Jordan's had an incredible year. He's essentially been the Astros leader, and they just clinched the division. That offense has been led by him, but you've seen Bregman, Altuve, Tucker, and Jeremy Pena all be really, really solid players. The Astros are a team with very few weaknesses. We're looking ahead at the playoffs kind of always because it's bearing down on us. We didn't really talk about the Astros at all, but they're currently the number 1 seed in the AL. They're going to be a dangerous out. Justin Verlander's pitching like he's 25 years old again. Man, I mean, this group is going to be tough, and cheating and all that aside, they've won a World Series pretty recently with a lot of players that are on this roster. They've been there. Jordan hasn't, but he has hit some really big playoff home runs in the last couple of years. So, I'm looking forward to see what Jordan can do here in the playoffs. Especially if we got the chance to see like a Jordan versus DeGrom matchup in the World Series or something, that might be real special.
Yeah, we've seen it. We've seen Jordan in the World Series, and his team wasn't anything special. But but
0 out of 10. I do not want to see a DeGrom versus Yordan World Series
I
matchup.
don't either. but
Hey,
but anyways,
I gotta bring up those matchups. I don't have a team in it.
there you
Yeah,
go. There
we're
you
a little
go.
bit biased.
Right, right. But if we want to move on to pitchers, I'll go ahead and start. I guess
Yep.
I went pick Yu Darvish. I know David was happy about that because he likes Yu Darvish a lot. But you know, you know, Yu Darvish had a two-start week, which obviously I always like to pick the guys on the two-start weeks. He pitched 14 innings, had I think 15 strikeouts, like one walk, pretty solid there. Zero runs allowed. I'd say that qualifies as pretty solid. And you know that's such an important because you know those two starts being at a time the Padres desperately needed them. They are right on that borderline of being a wild card team. They're in right now. In fact, I think they just passed the Phillies to be the second wild card instead of the third wild card. So they're right neck and neck with the Phillies, just a couple games above the Brewers, and they can't afford to lose many games. And you know that was big for them. Just a quick mention: Joe Musgrove also had a really good start this week too. So the Padres rotation definitely heating up at the right time that they desperately needed it. So you know, good for those guys, and especially you Darvish because he did it twice. So
Yu Darvish is the kind of guy that is such a personality that if you don't follow him, like on social media, or you don't like get to engage with him a lot, you won't notice it. But man, he funny off the field, and he's the kind of guy that when he left the Cubs, it was so disheartening because he was such an easily likable guy. So having you Darvish coming out shoving as we're getting closer to the playoffs, getting ready to anchor the Padres rotation, which is a team that already has some huge expectations and huge, you know, playoff requirements that they want to win the World Series this year. I mean, they've gone all in, they've pushed all their chips to the middle. Having a guy like you, Darvish, who's been there, who's suffered the playoff collapses before, he's got that experience and that wisdom to be able to lead this team forward. So, I expect I'm surprised by very little of you, Darvish, shoving here in September when it's time, for him to turn it on and show these young guys, hey, this is how we handle ourselves coming down to the playoffs. We got to take care of business.
Yeah, Yu Darvish has been very, very good for a long time. Outside of that one postseason collapse where he had with Tip in his pitches, he's been pretty good in the postseason as well. And he's really struggled to begin the year. I think he was a little bit of that sticky stuff merchant, but he's really found it second half of the year, and he's really found out how to shape his pitches back to what they were looking like. And if he doesn't get into that habit of tipping his pitches, which he can fall into every once in a while, he's a guy who can lead you and is one of the best pitchers in baseball, in a rotation where the Padres are going to need that because a lot of that rotation is real questionable behind him and Musgrove, with Mania and with Clevenger, and you just weren't sure what you're going to get out of which Snell's going to show up that day. So you need a guy like Darvish to really anchor that pitching staff down. But moving on, David, who do you have for your pitcher this week?
I got a Damian guy. I got Clayton Kershaw. And
Goat.
listen, all right. Damian and I talked about Clayton Kershaw, I think, during this week on Twitter. I was looking up, just kind of perusing career stats, right? And I kind of was looking at Jacob deGrom because I was like, man, he might be the best pitcher, that we've seen in the last several years. And I was looking at Jacob deGrom's career stats, and ironically, Clayton Kershaw has thrown about twice as many innings as Jacob deGrom, and they have the same career ERA. The Jacob deGrom would have to do what he's done a whole second time in order to reach what Clayton Kershaw has been able to do over his career. And that's career long. The last week, Clayton Kershaw had two starts. He's a .69 ERA. His curveball looks, he's getting on Pitching Ninja, throwing it 73 miles an hour, starting it, a foot over the batter's head, dropping it, directly to the bottom of the zone. He's on it right now, and in every way, as Yu Darvish being on is huge for the Padres. Clayton Kershaw being on is horrific news for the rest of the National League. He's another guy who's had some playoff demons. If Clayton Kershaw comes out and gets into the playoffs and starts pitching like this, it's going to be real tough for anybody to hang with the Dodgers. This is absolutely huge because Clayton Kershaw is so good. He's been so good for so long, and like Damian said, he's pushing for first ballot Hall of Fame status. He needs to go in and just have one more great postseason. I don't think anybody's ever going to be able to. There's no weaknesses in his armor. He's had a career already that could get him into the Hall of Fame. He's warming up. He's warming up for the postseason. This is looking scary for the rest of the National League.
I could talk a whole hour long show about what Clayton Kershaw is, but I will keep it short here. At the age of 34, at a year when he missed last postseason because of an elbow injury, retirement was a serious possibility this last offseason. He signed a 1 year deal to try and he's only going to sign 1 year deals and put everything into this team. Clayton Kershaw is having one of his best seasons ever at the age of 34, coming off of all of those question marks. I know he's still had some of the back issues flare up, but in 109 innings this year, a 2.39 ERA, a 2.49 expected ERA with a 2.5 FIP and a 2.85 expected FIP. Like, he's been about what you could have ever hoped for from Kershaw, but he's been just about that 2012 Clayton Kershaw, who had a 2.53 ERA and a 2.89 FIP that year. And through 227 innings, had 6.1 WAR. In 100 innings this year, he's at 3.4 already, which matches last year's total almost identically with like 15 less innings pitched. And he's helping anchor a rotation where Walker Buehler's already out, and they've already now clinched their division, which I don't think we've mentioned. Was one of the earliest teams to ever clinch their division in the history of the game. And I've already 103 wins. So I could ramble on about how good Kershaw's been and what he's meant to that team, and what this last week, what he just did last night with 10 strikeouts in 6 innings, and how every pitch looks just as good as it's ever been. But I'll stop ranting on that point.
Yeah, and I'll just add real quick. I mean, if Clayton Kershaw is healthy, obviously he's had the playoff demons before, but if he's healthy, he really does elevate the Dodgers to the World Series favorite, because obviously they already probably are even without him, but he the fact that really the Dodgers' only weakness is that pitching depth because of the injuries they've got. And if Kershaw is healthy and stays healthy and he's ready to go in the playoffs, then you really can run three guys out there that are that should be pretty good starters, and you're not going to worry about having an Andrew Heaney who's been a little inconsistent the second half of the year, or Tyler Anderson or somebody being that third starter. You can run Kershaw and Urias and Dustin May, and then have one of those guys be your fourth starter if you need it, and that would be your playoff rotation, and that's very formidable. Whereas you could see a scenario where the Dodgers could struggle in a series if they're, especially with with those two lefties that aren't quite as, they're not Kershaw level lefties being in there with Urias. It could just be a little bit, you could just get a little nervous about that, but definitely big week for Kershaw, and obviously, I mean, I mirror everything y'all said, except the part that this is one of his best years, because, I mean, I know he's been great, but think of the years he's had where he threw 232 innings and had a 2.13 ERA. I mean, I don't think this really trumps that, but obviously he's been really good this year on a rate basis, which is awesome, and I'm happy to see him out there and able to do it still at age 34. So.
Yeah, it's been really fun to watch. But we'll go from the two wily veterans, you want to say, to one of the young guys here who has just made his major league debut just a couple weeks ago for my pitcher this week, and it's going to be Hayden Wesneski. On the week only had the one start against Colorado, but it was 7 innings of 1-run ball there. I believe 6 of them. I believe the first 6 were shutout innings as well. Got a little bit rocked up there in the 7th inning, but 7 strikeouts, no walks. David and I saw the guy make his major league debut when I was there for Wrigley, and he was absolutely electric, pumping 96, 97 with a wipeout slider that just looked absolutely disgusting. And then a curveball that I don't think many people even realized he had once he came over from the Yankees. Really had him stop throwing it, and once he came back over to the Cubs, they had him start throwing it more and more, and it actually looked like a really good third pitch as well. Up there, and his family was insane. So it was fun to be there for that moment. And then the week he had just made me want to say that story and give him a little bit of a shout out, because I think it was only his second career start. Actually, no, it was his first actual start, because he came in out of the bullpen both times before that.
He's looked really, really good, and it's been a bit of a struggle for the Cubs to develop this starting pitching. They really just this year have finally started to home grow some of this pitching, but how huge it has been to be able to pick up a guy like Hayden Wesneski, who definitely he might never be a you know 12 strikeouts per 9 innings kind of a starting pitcher, ace level guy. But this is a guy who can rather easily, I think, be a rock solid starting pitcher in Major League Baseball. He's got the weapons. He throws hard enough. His delivery is a little herky jerky, which makes it a little confusing for the hitters, but it's also pretty mechanically sound and doesn't look all that not repeatable. His command is really good, as evidenced by this first start with no walks, and he's got a really supportive family. Man, we saw him. I fist bumped one of them walking by. Like they're a really great group, and I really wish for nothing but success from this kid. He's really exciting, and I'm really looking forward to following his career. He's the kind of guy who's real easy to root for.
Absolutely. But before we wrap this show up, anything either one of you guys wanna hit on?
Um, I don't think so. Just a couple weeks left, and we're almost, we're almost there to the end of the regular season, and I'm excited to see what happens. I mean, I think that we've got three or four. It's not the craziest division year. It's not 2011 all over again, but we've got three or four pretty close races that are going to be fun to watch, and I think it's gonna be a fun finish to the season. I'm excited. We'll be back next week to talk about the final week of the season, which it's just crazy to me that it's already here.
Three things. One, Albert Pujols is at 698.
Yep.
So I know we didn't talk about him today, but he has cooled off a little bit since we talked about him a couple of weeks ago.
You sure it's not 498?
Damien.
Pretty sure.
No.
That's what Damien said last week.
Yeah.
Oh.
Last week I messed up and I said 497 homers. So
Well, he's gotten one since last week, it looks like. So there's that. Kyle Schwarber just hit his 40th home run, which means that somebody might get within 20 home runs of Aaron Judge, which is hilarious to say. And then the last thing would be, I guess I'm just ready for the offseason. Oh, the Cubs didn't lose 100 games. That's what it was. Won their 63rd tonight.
Nice.
Yep.
Kind of surprised.
Yay.
congrats.
Yeah. Yay.
But
that's not what we should be happy about at all. But all right. Yeah, that was it.
what better way to wrap up episode 97 of the Bat Flip podcast than that? I can't think of one, honestly. But, thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoy it, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.